That's okay. Okay. You leave it there. I'll take it there from there. Okay. Okay. This is a forum. We are good.
So we're ringing the bell.
Yeah, open it. Father, we thank you for this class. You're good to us. You've given us life. Can us up on this first day of November. We are ready, Lord. In this class, to know how to look back and the things that are at the back of our lives, help us to unpack so that we can be better men. We surrender our lives in this lesson to you. Have your way. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, I'll open that door in a minute. So in your books, it's lesson number 4. Okay, here he comes.
Yeah, you guys are probably wondering what's with the suitcase, okay? And here's what I want you to know. Every man carries a suitcase. Every one of us. And how you unpack your suitcase is going to determine the kind of man you're going to become. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. What I thought I'd do this morning, though, first of all, is just start off with a little quiz that I found in Dave Barry's book, A Guide to Guys. Barry says that there's a new breed of men that is rising up in America called guys, and he gives a quiz to determine whether you are a guy or not. So I'm going to give you that quiz, and you can answer this multiple choice questionnaire, and you can see where you stand on the guy factor. Here's what he says. Question 1. Alien beings from a highly advanced society visit Earth, and you're the first human they encounter. As a token of intergalactic friendship, they present you with a small but incredibly sophisticated device that is capable of curing all disease, providing an infinite supply of clean energy, wiping out hunger and poverty, and permanently eliminating oppression and violence all over the entire Earth. You decide to, okay, here it is. A, present it to the President of the United States. B, present it to the Secretary General of the United Nations. C, take it apart. Question 2, as you grow older, what quality of your youthful life do you miss the most? A, innocence. B, idealism. C, cherry bombs. In your opinion, the ideal pet is A, a cat, B, a dog, C, a dog that eats cats. You've been seeing a woman for several years. She's attractive and intelligent, and you always enjoy being with her. One leisurely Sunday afternoon, the two of you are taking it easy. You're watching a football game. She's reading the papers. When she suddenly, out of the clear blue sky, tells you she thinks she really loves you, but she can no longer bear the uncertainty of not knowing where your relationship is going. She says she's not asking whether you want to get married, only whether you believe that you will have some kind of future together. What do you say? A, that you sincerely believe the two of you do have a future and that you don't want to rush into it. B, that although you have strong feelings for her, you cannot honestly say that you're ready anytime soon to make a lasting commitment, and you don't want to hurt her feelings by holding out false hope. Or C, that you cannot believe the Jets called a draw play on 3rd and 17. One weekday morning, your wife wakes up feeling really ill and asks you to get your 3 children ready for school. Your first question to her is, A, do they need to eat or anything? B, you mean they're already in school? C, there are 3 of them? When is it okay to throw away a set of veteran underwear? A, when it has turned the color of a dead whale? B, when it has developed new holes so large that you're not sure which ones were originally intended for your legs? Or C, it is never okay for a guy to throw away veteran underwear. Well, maybe that'll help you kind of determine where you are on the guy quotient, and whether you're a guy or whether you're in the process of where we're going together. And where we're going together is Authentic Manhood. What I'd like to do this morning is just kind of summarize where we've been the last few weeks here at the beginning, because in the last few weeks we have been exploring the struggle of becoming an authentic man. It seems it's harder and harder to get there today. And I want to just remind you of some of the reasons why we find that journey so difficult. Notice on your outline, some of it has to do with society and the changes within it. You know, we talked a few weeks ago about the Industrial Revolution that swept over our country in the early 1900s. It introduced for the first time in mass distant fathering, where a father no longer worked around the home, but for the first time in mass, there was a mass exodus from the home where dad began to work away from home, in the city, at the office, at the factory. And with that, the natural masculine modeling that occurred with dad side by side with his son, where a son got to see what a dad is and what a dad does in the best hours of a dad's day, that was lost for the first time. And mentoring a son was now relegated more and more to mom, and the world of women and those strong social and emotional bonds between a father and his son were severed. World War II also impacted manhood as we now know it. Yes, it created a generation of strong, courageous, and heroic men, but it also created, when they came home, as they went into the workplace, as many of them couldn't face their own feelings after what they had been through, it created a huge emotional disconnect with a whole generation of fathers and sons. And there are men in this room here today who grew up with a World War II vet who still longs for that emotional connection with dad. Some of it had to do with the gender revolution, which began in the 60s and the 70s, and which really continues to this day. A revolution that redefined and expanded a woman's world in a significant way, but at the same time it seemed to downsize and even gut the world of men. And we find ourselves at a place where here in the first part of the 21st century we're asking, so what is a man and what does a man do? What's his role, especially in relationship to a woman? And it seems those roles really have almost been reversed today. Last night I was watching a car commercial. I like to watch commercials because commercials tell us the value system of our world. And in this car commercial, this beautiful car drove into a service station, and interestingly enough, there was a sharp young woman, and she was driving the car, and her boyfriend was in the driver's seat. And he gets out of the car to fill the car up with some gas, and as he goes to get the gas, she uses the automatic knob that's there on her dashboard to fix the rear view mirror, the side mirror, that it moves back and forth to fixate on his rear end so she can watch it. And then, of course, as he goes to fill the car up with gas, he's totally inept. He's forgot his wallet. He has no money. So she pulls the car back, touches the electronic window button, it goes down, and she hands him the credit card so he can pay for the gas. And that was supposed to be attractive. What that shows is a little window into the world of masculinity in our world today, where a man no longer knows what it means to be a man, where the warrior has been drained out of him, where he's responding to the leadership of a strong, assertive, confident woman, but he himself hasn't a clue where he's going. And those images are bombarding the next generation of young men every day through the media. Some of it has to do with society and how it's affected us. That's why we are the way we are. Secondly, some of it has to do with family dynamics. Everybody, I told you last week, has a story, has a family story. And I told you mine last week. But you may have been in here thinking about your family dynamics. You may have had two parents that you grew up with. You may have had one parent You may have had no parents at all growing up. You may have been raised by an aunt. You may have been raised by a grandparent or a step-parent or by the state. But whatever your condition growing up, it has made a huge impact on the kind of man that you are today and how you are and what you feel about life. Maybe you came from a loving home, but it was a loving home that lacked clear direction. There are a lot of homes like that today, where a young man's growing up and his parents are more involved, maybe even in the previous generation, but a lot of their involvement is just being around him, attending his events like his sports events or school events or those kind of things. But as far as investing any kind of sense of direction, they're not doing that. I had a meeting with a group of parents talking about empowering your teen, and I asked those parents in that meeting, how many of you all attend your son's ball games? And almost every hand went up in the room. I thought that was good. How many of you help him with his homework? All the hands went up. And I thought, boy, that's good. Then I asked this question, a more substantive question, I think. How many of you have taught your son what it means to be a man? No hands went up. How many of you taught your son how he's to relate to a woman? How he dates and how he interacts with the opposite sex? No hands went up. How many of you taught him what his role is going to be in marriage and how he's going to interface in that intimate setting with a woman? No hands went up. Now what that means is that's a warm, loving home, but it's a directionless home. Some of you may have grown up in that, and then what you find is you move out away from home into the world for yourself, that there are a lot of life skills that you lack. And it affects how you come across as a man. Some of you may have grown up in a home that was hurt by favoritism. You grew up in a home where maybe the older brother or the older sister or the younger son seemed to get all the attention. And you kept playing off of that, and it made you mad and angry, and you didn't know how to deal with that. So you defined your whole life there in those early years off of a sibling, off of the older brother. And your life has been defined by that. And maybe it's still in some ways defined by that. Some of you grew up in a home where there are unholy alliances. Maybe because of the broken marriage that your parents had, your mom married you. She brought you into her world to be her chief companion. And it created kind of a weird scenario there. Or maybe, like I told you last week, there was so much friction in the home, you as a son were drafted in to be the mediator between two parents. And it caused you to become something that you didn't want, but somehow you felt thrust upon you. Some of you grew up in a home where there was abuse or betrayal or abandonment. Or maybe there was poor manhood modeling altogether. Wasn't that there was anything necessarily wrong in the home, but it's just how your dad modeled manhood to you left you with a poor model. I remember a friend of mine whose dad had a very good job, but we would go over to his house after school. This was during my high school years, and play basketball out in the garage area. And every day his dad would come home from this high-powered, high-paying job, and he would have the exact same routine. He would walk in the door with his briefcase. He would say hi to us. He would go over to a cabinet, open it up, pour himself a scotch and water, and go sit in his leather chair. And he would drink for the rest of the evening. He did that every day. And my buddy, who lived in that home, grew up, and when he left home, and if somebody were to ask him, what is a man? He would turn and go, there it is. And I just want you to know, those kind of experiences have a tremendous impact on the kind of man that you are today. Now, looking back at your family dynamics is very important, as we talked about last week, for one important reason. Here it is. It's because you can't change what you don't understand. And it's very important that you understand your family dynamics in order to change the things that need to be adjusted. So some of it has to do with family dynamics. Some of it, even in a closer way, has to do with just Dad himself. I remember seeing the cover of Newsweek, and the cover of Newsweek one day said this. It said, "Dad is destiny." Dad is destiny. It went on to point out that science shows that it's a dad's chromosomes when there is this union between egg and sperm that determines, it's dad's chromosomes that determine whether the sex of the baby is going to be a boy or a girl. But even more importantly in that article, it went on to say that research shows that it's the presence of Dad in the family that determines whether the boy is going to be masculine or whether he's going to be passive or effeminate. And it's Dad's presence in the family that determines whether the daughter is going to be feminine or whether she's going to be overly assertive, promiscuous, or have a masculine look to herself. It's Dad's presence that does that. And that's because Dad is destiny. And yet in more and more American homes, whether you know it or not, and here we're back to the society in which we live, Dad's AWOL. Just in 1960, 17% of all families in America were fatherless. And here we are at the beginning of the 21st century. 40% of all the families in America are fatherless. Dad is destiny, and without Dad, men struggle. Much of the struggle, in fact, that we're going to talk about in the next few weeks of sons has its root right back into the life of Dad. So, I mentioned those three things: society, family dynamics, Dad. So, how do you rise above those kind of things? How do you resist the temptation to submit to those forces I've just mentioned, or consider yourself just the victim of those things? And I don't want you to play the victim. How do you rise above those things and seize the kind of authentic manhood that we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks? I believe that authentic manhood revolves around three critical issues. We're going to spend most of our time on the first one, and I'm just going to briefly mention the next two. But here's the first one, the one that we're going to bear down on here this morning. It's this: addressing the unfinished business of my past. Addressing the unfinished business of my past. Now, when I say that, I want you to hear that I'm not talking about blaming my past for who I am. This is not a blame game that we're addressing here. It's much more important than that. What I'm doing is I'm talking about getting in touch with my past and understanding it so I can be the man I need to be, and I can change the things that I need to change. And that is critical in altering a man's focus and stabilizing his stance so that he can move forward in an empowered way to be the kind of man that he needs to be. Now, I came up here with a suitcase, and I want you to know every man carries a suitcase. Some of your suitcases are large like this one. There are some guys who have just a small, kind of an overnighter. But every man carries a suitcase in his life. And how he unpacks that suitcase will determine the kind of man that he's going to become. Now, I call the unfinished business that's in this suitcase, because that's what's in here, is unfinished business. I call those manhood wounds. And I want to talk to the whole issue of what a wound is, first of all. What do we mean by wounds or a wound? Here's a formal definition for you to fill out. A wound is any unresolved issue where lack of closure adversely impacts and shapes the direction and dynamics of a man's life now. Let me say it again. A wound is any unresolved issue where lack of closure adversely impacts and shapes the direction and dynamics of a man's life now. A number of years ago, when my son Garrett was in junior high school, he was with another boy and they were out playing basketball. And at the end of the day, they were in this gym where there were a lot of portable basketball goals. They were asked to move one of those goals. And this particular goal, it was a big metal plate stand in which the goal sat. And so they pulled it up and they were rolling it down the court. And he was in front of that plate rolling it down, where suddenly the plate became detached from the goal and fell. And he went to jump back, but as the plate came down, it landed on the end of his toes on his right foot. The force of that steel plate coming down on those toes was so powerful that it exploded the ends of his big toe and his next toe completely off. I remember rushing into the emergency room with him as the doctors pulled that sock off and with him the ends of his toes. And they tried to reattach those toes, but some months later, that surgical procedure didn't work, so we had to amputate the ends of those toes. And to this day, every morning when he gets up to put on his socks, he is reminded of an event that took place now some 10 years ago. Physically affected because of the scars that are still there with those two nubs that he sees when he puts his sock on. Physical wounds leave physical scars, but the deepest wounds of a man's life are not physical, guys. And this is so important that you hear this, because my particular opinion is that we men are pretty fragile. The deepest wounds of a man's life are the wounds of his soul that he experiences that oftentimes don't heal up. They're inflicted on us by circumstances that we don't choose. They're not of our own choosing, or we do choose, but they leave these open wounds that then go on and continue to affect the way we live now. Now, the natural instinct of a man who has a wound of his soul is just simply to pretend it's not there, to bury it, and just go on with his life. But the truth is, what happens is when we have a wound that we don't deal with, some kind of unfinished business of the past, it does affect us, and we tend to begin to compensate for it, just like we would if we lost the toes of our foot. We'd begin to limp to compensate for it. The wounds of the soul, you begin to compensate for them in your life and in the way that you live your life. For instance, if you grew up in a home where there was a lot of turmoil and you experienced a lot of pain, you know what some guys do in that? They compensate for that pain by learning not to feel. They just simply take a lid and put a lid on their feelings. And that helps them get through those difficult years. But it's very difficult, for instance, to have a warm relationship with people or an intimate relationship with a wife or a warm engagement with children when you don't feel. And for some guys, when they put that lid on that pain, it keeps wanting to open. And so to compensate for that lid wanting to come up, they have to find coping mechanisms like chemicals, drugs, or alcohol, or pleasurable experiences like sex and pornography to offset the pain that they don't want to deal with. That's what I mean by an opened wound. I see 5 common wounds that are inside most men today. Here's the first one. Let's go into our suitcase just for a minute. I'm going to use this as the symbol. The absent father wound. And when I say absent father, I mean either a dad who wasn't there altogether, or a dad who was there, but he wasn't there. In the 60s, I used to hear this wound played out on the radio with a song that went like this. My son turned 10 just the other day. He said, "Thanks for the ball, Dad. Come on, let's play. Can you teach me to throw?" I said, "Not today. I've got a lot to do." And he said, "Well, that's okay. and the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man in the moon. When you coming home, Dad? I don't know when, but we'll get together then, son. You know we'll have a good time then. Now that was the 60s. Now we're in the 21st century, and the thrill of sons who have this wound has grown harsher and shriller. I listened to a band called Everclear write their song about fathers and sons in this generation. I want you to listen to these words. Father of mine, tell me, where have you been? Father of mine, take me back to the day when I was still your golden boy, back before you went away. I remember blue skies walking the block. I loved it when you held me high. I loved to hear you talk. You would take me to the movie. You would take me to the beach. You would take me to a place inside that is now so hard to reach. Father of mine, tell me, where did you go? You had the world inside your hand, but you did not seem to know. Father of mine, tell me, what do you see when you look back at your wasted life and you don't see me? Daddy gave me a name. My dad gave me a name. And then he walked away. Then he walked away. My dad gave me a name. I will never be safe. I will never be sane. I will always be weird inside. I will always be lame. Daddy gave me a name, and then he walked away. My dad, he gave me a name, and then he walked away. My dad gave me a name, and then he walked away. And when he walked away, he left a huge wound in my life. And a lot of young men have never, ever finished this business with Dad. It's so easy in that midst to either get angry, close the lid on my feelings, and pretend this is going to go away. But I want you to know, guys, it doesn't go away until you deal with it in an appropriate way and then put it to rest so you can go on and live an authentic manhood life. That's what I mean when I talk about this father wound that is so important in guys. Then secondly, there's what I call the overly bonded with mother wound. Give me just a second while I dress up. The overly bonded with mother wound. Now this looks pretty silly, doesn't it? And I used to think it was real silly until I found out there are a lot of guys who look like this. They don't know they look like this. But in fact, they look like this. You see, this wound often occurs when you were growing up and Mom, for whatever reason, invested too strongly in you. She didn't mean to hurt you. That was not her intent. Many times she rushed in because she was trying to compensate for the dad that wasn't there. Or maybe he was there and not involved, but she got over-involved and she overly nurtured you and overly controlled you and touched your world too much. She bonded with you too deeply and she took care of you too often. And you know what the results are? The results are that a guy goes out in life wounded by being overly bonded with his mom. Oftentimes, he has one or two reactions in that kind of environment. He either resents that control and fought with that control and didn't like that control, and so he goes out with an image of, I'm not going to be controlled by anyone, particularly women, and so he always has a difficult time with women because he either has to dominate them or he's scared of them because he sees the shadow of mother in all of them. Or else, like a lot of guys today, he succumbed to this control. And he succumbed to this power that bonded with him too deeply. And so here he is at 25 or 35 or 45 or 55. I see guys like this all the time. And Mom, in whatever way, from whatever distance, is still dictating the terms. and controlling the emotions and violating the boundaries of his family. She calls up a 40-year-old businessman named Tom and says to Tom, Tommy, you and your family are coming to our house for dinner, right? And his wife hates that, but he can't say no because he has no boundaries with Mom. And he doesn't know why. But I want you to know, I'm starting to learn why. The reason why is because he has an overly bonded with mother wound in his life. Then there's a third wound. It's called the all-alone wound. We mentioned that real briefly a few weeks ago. You know, every man is supposed to be climbing a mountain. It's called the mountain of manhood, and he's supposed to be cinched in with some other guys real tight. And he's supposed to have his rope attached. We were made to be attached, guys, to other men so that we could climb that high mountain of authentic manhood. But you know, a lot of us have our ropes cut, and we're all alone. We have no close friends connected to us who have access to our inner life. Oh, they do to our outer life, but I'm talking about our inner life. And so when we're going through turmoil, we do so all by ourselves. We have no close friends connected to us who can cheer for us in the noble things of life. The things that we would like to tell somebody else, like how we stayed pure on that business trip with that female associate, or how we took our wife out to some special romantic evening, or how we've been investing in our sons or daughters in some special way, and we need other guys to cheer for us, and we want to tell them about those significant things, but there's nobody to talk to about that. Who would listen to us? Would they think it was corny? So we don't have any cheers because we're not connected, especially in the noble things of life. We have no close friends who connect us to something very, very important, and that is a larger, more accurate perspective of life, which we desperately need to see. Therefore, we doom ourselves to blind spots. How many times have you been in a circle where some guys will start talking and they'll be talking about old Joe or old Wayne, and there's some obvious, huge blind spots in his life, but nobody will tell him. And so it kind of becomes kind of a side conversation among a group about his life as he continues to make the same error again and again, and he's known for it, but nobody delivers him from that circle of doom because he can't see it, but he's not connected in a way that other men feel safe enough to tell him about it. And that's what I mean about the all-alone wound. You know, one of the ingredients in modern life that's missing so desperately, and I just think it was divine coincidence maybe that Bill mentioned it even this morning, is older men attaching themselves in friendships to younger men. Older men who get with younger men who encourage them and mentor them. And yet that seems to be missing in our world today. Most young men have no older man that is around them who's just admiring them and encouraging them in their life. That whole power has been short-circuited. And yet, do you know, older men, what it means for you to walk up to a younger guy kind of out of the blue and put your hand on his shoulder and say, I've been watching you. You know what? You're good. I mean, you're really good. That changes a young man's life. Just those few words from an older veteran. And yet we've disconnected in that regard. The switch has been pulled out and cut. And you know what? Both the younger men and the older men lose. The younger men lose the wisdom of the ages to help them, and the encouragement and the admiration that comes that causes them to walk taller and climb higher. And the older men, as they grow older, miss the energy and the deep sense of purpose mentoring a younger man will bring to their life, because we were wired to do that. So what happens in this all alone wound is that we both lose. I want you to know, you got to be connected. And we need to talk about how you get connected. The next is what I call the lack of a manhood vision wound. It's where you have no vision about who you're going to be. You're out there looking around, but rather than having field glasses to survey the landscape to see the long-range distance of life, all you got is a short-range distance. Only as far as you can see. You have no help to carry you for the long haul. And so what happens is most men are kind of living in the now. That's the vision. Wednesday, what's your vision? Wednesday? Tomorrow, what's your vision? Thursday? Well, how about the weekend? Hadn't thought that far out yet. Hadn't got there. And what the world comes in and does is our world comes in, at least here in the 21st century, and it's offered, like it did in the 20th century, a stunted, short-sighted vision of manhood. We'll expand this term later, but you can just write down a conventional vision of manhood. And we'll expand on that term later. But here's what, in the short summary, a conventional vision of manhood is all about. It tells a young man in high school and as he moves out into the workforce or into college, it tells a young man, listen, if you'll put your warrior face on, get it on there, put that mask on, clamp down the armor tight, if you'll put that warrior face on and you go out and you'll work hard, I mean work real hard. And I know it's going to hurt. And it's probably going to hurt your family too. But if you'll work real hard in the end, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get what you want, and then you won't need anybody. You'll get there. You'll be on the mountain. It tells you that in this insulated, isolated, self-sufficient state of prosperity vision, you'll be happy and satisfied. And so generation after generation of young men launch out of those boats with that warrior face on, saying, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the hill. And about 35 or 45 or 55, most of them finally burn out and say, it's not working, I'll never get there. So then they feel disappointed with their lives. And the few who make it, the few who get to the top, and they've made enough where they can have all that they want, and they don't need anyone, then they find out the awful truth. And that is, the conventional vision of manhood is a lie. Now what? And it creates a great wound because we have no vision that will take us over a lifetime into a noble masculinity. And finally, I want to mention one last one. It's what I call the heart wound. Now, you may have gone through the first 4 of the wounds that I mentioned, and as you were listening to me talk, say, man, I'm sorry guys feel that way. I don't have that wound. But this wound, everyone has. Because this is not a wound of nurture. This is a wound that we're born with. This is a wound of nature. Since the beginning of time, man has questioned why he feels pulled to do evil. Now, you don't have to be a philosopher here today to think about this, but just think for a moment. Have there been moments in your life where you've just sat back and said to yourself, why do I find myself at times doing the things that I don't want to do, that I know are wrong? Why do I keep investing myself in things that I know are going to hurt me and my family, and yet I keep doing it? Why do I get out of control? Why can't I do the things that are right? Why do I give in to temptation, to anger? Why is it that the things I know are right and I know would help everyone, I can't find the power to do? Have you ever asked those questions of yourself? Sure you have. Because we've all experienced this particular wound. And the answer to those questions is this. We all have a wound of the soul and spirit that no counselor can fix. It's just part of our birthright, unfortunately. And it's a wound that requires a deeper answer. And we're going to address that deeper answer later on in the year. But here's what I want you to know. You'll walk out of here with this problem. And unless you've learned how to fix it, this problem will continually, every day, undercut your masculinity and your attempts at authentic manhood. That's what the wound represents. So here we are with this suitcase full of stuff. Some of us with a father wound. Some of us with an overly bonded with mother wound. Some of us are just all alone. Some of us can't see. And all of us have a wounded heart. And it's part of the suitcase that we carry out of here with us today. And how a man addresses this unfinished business will determine the kind of man he will become. So, the first issue in authentic manhood is addressing the unfinished business of my past. Now, guys, here's what I want you to know here today, and I want to be real honest with you. Starting next week, it's going to be like we've been in a raft when you've taken one of those rafting trips. You've been in with a group of people and you've been kind of floating down the river having a good time, and then the guide says, get ready, we're about to go into some white water. That's where we'll start in the next week, starting to move into that white water of masculinity to deal with this kind of unfinished business. And that's what we're going to do for most of this fall together. But that's to address the unfinished business. Then secondly, remember I said there were three things, and I'll only mention the last two briefly. We said the first thing that's critical to authentic manhood is addressing unfinished business. The second is this, establishing a clear and compelling manhood vision. Of course, that addresses the vision in the suitcase. But beginning in January, what we're going to do is carve out a vision that I think is clearly superior to the conventional vision of manhood that I just pointed out to you just a few minutes ago. And I think you're going to be excited about that vision. Because I've seen a lot of guys hear that vision and all of a sudden for the first time they stand tall and they say, that's the kind of man I want to be. And then he sees a group of guys around him saying, let's go for it. Let's get connected and go for it. That's what we'll be talking about specifically in January. And then finally, I want you to know authentic manhood revolves around creating a high-impact, workable plan for my life. And you've got that plan in your hands already. I gave it to you. And you need to now start looking it over. And I'd like you to start reading it, especially part 1, because part 1, if you notice on your plan, is called Looking Back. And so I want you to begin to answer those questions. You have that due in December. But you need to start asking those questions now and thinking about your life in relationship to those questions. But more importantly, that sheet, that first part that says Looking Back, starts asking you to write down specific goals that you are going to set for yourself to address this suitcase. And how you come up with a plan to address this suitcase is going to determine, in part, the kind of noble, authentic man you will become. I call it the second step of authentic manhood. Unpacking, and I'll see you next week.
Yeah, gentlemen. Packing. You believe you have things to unpack? Are there? they come from how we grew up. There could be things there that really need to be addressed if we are to become who we ought to be, because we are coming from a society. Yeah, yeah. Everyone has a community where you grew up. That's from that very first family you grew up in, and you entered the society, the community you have grown into. Family dynamics are always with us. They define who we become. And there is this profound statement about dad, that daddy is destiny. I thank God that there's a daddy here with his son. I left my two sons in the house, they're sleeping. But I go with them to the class at night. Daddy is destiny. Believe you me, those 40% of children in America growing without a father, they're in big trouble. They're in big trouble. Without a father in your life, I bet you there are things there. Don't you let your children grow without you. And if you let that happen, you're really inflicting wounds. The very first wound that was identified, the very first one is called the absent father wound. I mean, number two of your book. I mean, number two of the meeting. You know, what wounds are we talking about? Absent wound. I told you when I grew up, my father was a weekend father. So he worked in the city, and we were with mom during the week. He came on Friday. But that did not mean he was absent. We felt his presence because when he left assignment to be done. The coffee has to go to the coffee factory, and you guys have to go to school. And this car wasn't going, hey, they have to eat, and the milk has to be harvested evenings and mornings. So daddy was felt. He wasn't absent. He came. So if you have a job that takes you away from the home, return to that home as often as you can. And if it means that you can. You're not that kind of absent. But there are daddies whose children, they don't know where they are. I'm a counselor and I've had it. I didn't know my dad. Or I saw my daddy twice in my life. Now that surely is an absent daddy. But a daddy who goes to work and come back. Who didn't come? He didn't judge that man. He had to make bread, right? He had to make bread. So the absent wood, father wood is real present. Now, when daddy is largely absent, whoever is present is mom. Believe you me, if you only grew with the mom alone, this wood called the overly bonded with the mother wood, it will actually manifest. How does it manifest? Because mommy will be busy trying to cover for daddy. She'll be both mom and dad. And what happens is they try to toughen up, become a warrior, but maybe they might not get there. They try to be a leader, balancing it all. That's not how God intended it to be. He intended there to be a father and there to be a mother. Even you, if you had the children alone and you have to try to be a mom at one point and a daddy at the, that's an overwhelming task, a daunting task. So this wood called overly bonded with mother wood person. And guys who have grown with the mother alone, oh my God, I was counseling a guy down in Greenbelt. He was in his 30s, but even in counseling, his mother brought him. He was 30. His mother brought him to counseling, and she insisted on coming to the session. Oh my God. And even when she was waiting at the sitting room, the guy would always say, my mom, my mom. I don't know whether mommy would like that. So the masculinity will be totally revealing. I don't know what word to use there. Overly bonded with mother. There are things. So sometimes also they become very bitter because of something money did when he was always in my face. Overly bonded with motherhood. There are guys who decide that they're gonna be all by themselves. The way he said it, he said that some people learn if I can toughen up and work real hard, I will not need another man. I dare say to you, that's the wrong approach. The all alone man is a problem. We can't be alone. We can't be the road ranger. At some point, go out and meet some men, right? Yeah, you can't be a lone ranger and become a well-baked person. But this one here, not being connected, is a wound there. How about not coming up with a vision of who you want to be in life? You know, a kind of a direction. Personally, I give God the glory that at age 12, I felt I was called to teaching. I really wanted to be a teacher. And I still teach. Gentlemen, I still teach. You know it. I really had a direction. I knew I was going to be with people doing something. So I became a teacher, I became a pastor, I became a counselor, and I pray those rules. It's important for somebody at some point to say to another person, this is who I feel I need to be. And that becomes a vision. That becomes something that you will not settle until you get there. A compelling vision. Whoever you want to be. Some people tell me I want to be a footballer. Some people tell me I want to be a lawyer. Or tell me I want to be a businessman. Okay, have a plan together and make sure you get there. Make sure it is something that will define you. It is important. It is important. It is important. The fifth word, the word not of nature, because the four are words of nature, but this one is a nature word, the word of the heart. I call it having a propensity to do evil, either to yourself or to other people. And people who go into drinking or drug addiction or pornography or stuff like that, they have this word in a heartbeat. A heartbeat. A word that it looks like they're out on a mission to hurt themselves. And they can't help it. Other people just there floating, and you can not actually point what they are up to. The word of nature, and this one has to be dealt with by each one of us by realizing who we are, by deciding to work on us, so that we can do B and C, which is have a clear and compelling vision, and also have a plan that we are working on, so we can become really exactly who God wanted us to be. Gentlemen, there are questions down there to answer in the small group. But I kept asking myself, where did our class go? We had 24 men signed up. 24. We are now how many? Are we 5? Something like that. 6. It's okay. I've been here, done that. I see this all along. There's nothing we did to them. Men are hard together. Men are hard together. But don't be that man. Just crash the service and then leave it. Don't. Go on with it. I'll be here. I'll be the last one to go. I assure you, I'll be the last guy to literally take an exit. I would. But that's what I've told God. I told God, between 2020 and 2030, this is what I'm doing. And I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it till we finish this book, till we finish another book. Even if we are 2 or 3, I'll say what the Bible says, where 2 or 3 gather, there you are. But don't worry, when you turn around and you see that guy not there, you're here. You're here. That's important. So, number one there, which kind of suitcase do you think you carry? Is it a small one? Is it a medium-sized one? Is it a large one? Can you explain? Now, a small wood means not many issues that you can identify with that he was given. But nobody can say I have no suitcase because we all have a suitcase. Yeah. What kind of a size of suitcase do you have? It depends on what issues you're feeling you need to address. Yeah, small, medium, large. What would you say? What would be your response to that question?
My answer is not only I need a triple XL.
Say that again, Mike.
I, uh, I would get triple XL.
Triple
Big,
XL?
big XL.
So X large.
XL. Yes, sir.
So we are putting for what X large. Would you give us an explanation? What did you say there?
Well, I say that because, I think can identify with a lot of the topics today.
Mhm.
And they have those But it seems as though through this time in my life,
Mhm.
identifying issues that I've had in my life that have been where I am today.
Mhm.
Without realizing that these were.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's a ton of those. As we go through life, we still develop more issues.
Mhm.
As we may an issue because they're in a better position in life, there are more issues that come in. So there's always something in that external
Mhm.
versus something that's small.
Mhm.
You're not really being true to yourself. If anyone thinks that they have small or nothing, this is just be going to work and working with side by side with the person. You love your job, but this person is you to the end each day, every day. Still an issue. Pretty much a large suitcase because it's come and go.
Yeah.
But the crucial thing is dealing with the issues, especially other things that put us where we are today in order to move on to handle the new issues.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, I hear you. I hear you. Who else will give this question a response?
Well, I thought I had a small one till he explained. This mine's larger than I thought too,
Mhm.
because there's a lot more issues than just what he can go over. But
Mhm.
for me, I guess the the vision and plan would be, that's what really jumps out at me.
The vision of the
As
plan.
far as the ones he explains about, but
Yeah.
like he's mentioned that there's other issues, we got to deal with every day.
Yeah.
I mean,
So you need to shape your vision. Shape your vision. Make it compelling, right? And pursue that vision as a plan. Okay. 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 How about Rodney?
thinking about speaking. I guess I was sitting at the beach.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Summers with my dad. Brothers actually.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
what
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
young you growing up,
Yeah.
looking at things from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess got a job and business.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm saving
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Uh, father and son here. Tell us about your suitcases. Okay. Yeah. 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 I hear you, but you have an opportunity to deal with it, no matter what size. And I dare tell you this. It might look small now. If you don't act on it, it's another time you might say, "Oh, it's no longer small. It's no longer small." You heard the guys who are behind you saying they know the wood that the suitcases were small, but now they're thinking, "Oh no, they're not that small." Address it. Address it. And growing up, I the wow. Start one. So what kind of suitcase is that now? Have a suitcase. Yeah, 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 yeah. And it's what, small? Oh, okay. All right. You began to answer question number two. Which of the five wounds unpacked this morning would you feel an immediate identification with? Why? You see, they all are the same. That is a good response. That all alone, but you understand that all alone is a good, thing because they are people. First of all, you don't live alone with a family. And community will be at work. But if you come to our lesson number two, we look at work. And work also has to do with community out home. And home is another, another world. So, uh, yeah, address it, it's important. And by the way, each of the words that have been mentioned, the five of them, they'll be dealt with each in a chapter. Each starting pretty soon, the absent father. That will be dealt with, I believe, in the next two lessons or something like that. Because very big one. 40% of kids in America growing without a father. That is huge. That is huge. Where did the fathers go? Some of them lost their wives and they left home. It's a very sad thing to say this, but I have seen it in my counseling career. People losing marriage. Right now, I have a gentleman, 55 years old, no disclosure here, but I'm just saying that he is 55. He has been married 30 years. And they were continuing with their life. He discovered that they were growing apart. They were drifting. When the last child left, and it is not leaving home, it is going to college. When the last child went to college, they couldn't fit together. They have 5 children from the age of, if the young age in marriage, 10, coming down to 25. The last child is in college. We discovered they are not together anymore with the wife. They went for a vacation and he told me he felt like he was with a stranger in a vacation with like with another couple. And so he left and began to stay elsewhere, not at home. And my God, talking about it, it's very sad in the session that you walk away from a home you call home 30 years. And those human beings are not dead. Well, they have only left. But it's children living home, not belonging there. So they still belong there, and they belong to both of us. So now he's learning how to do family without doing marriage. You hear that? And I have to join him there because what counseling is joining somebody where he's at and trying to walk with it. He's learning to do family without doing marriage. So we are learning to take a person, maybe don't fail to talk to her, or to treat her as a friend. The intimate has gone away, and you're not even doing finances together, but you have children together, right? And she's not dead, neither are you dead. So that's what we are learning. But can you see how that has twisted itself? And why did it? Why did that happen? Well, because life happens too. Life happens. I will never look at anybody and say why.
Dr. Toronto, when I was growing up, I saw men who really loved their wives. I got two brothers, they love their wives.
Yeah. Yeah.
At a young age, I started being big lights and things. That just fell apart. Even though I didn't have all the tools to make my marriage like pristine, and I am married 30 years next year. Something I took on when I was younger, I didn't want to bail out. Because I've heard people talk about the effects, and people like to think that it's supposed to go a certain way, specifically women when it comes to romance and stuff. But in life, Christ, what he did involved pain.
Yeah.
If he hadn't went through what he went through, he wouldn't have been redeemed unto our Father.
Yeah.
Because we're all flawed.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that a lot of people they forget about. And we need people to guide us along the way. You're not going to know it all.
Yeah.
It's just, I didn't want to bail because, and I didn't understand the different phases you go through like until later. So that being said, you got to that point. I see many people do it, and they said, you're empty nesters. Well, I'm gonna live my life now. No, wait a minute. You didn't toss it away. Y'all got children.
Yeah.
You're gonna have grandkids possibly.
Yeah.
You've accomplished a lot. How can you say you've accomplished nothing together? We hate each other, right?
Yeah.
Let's find out what was missing and get back on a horse.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you become an nester, life is unfolding the life of grandfather, right?
Yes.
Grandmother, right? And it's best done together, right?
Yes.
Not alone again. So anyway, as a counselor, I have to wear all those hats of joining people where they are at and never ever looking at anybody else. Because life happens, isn't it? Maybe something that happened in the friendship actually, like glue, that adhesive, that thing that they got together. Sometimes I think it will dry up and I don't know how it does, So while you still got it, while I still got it, please make sure that it is holding. Do whatever you can to make sure that yeah. Do whatever you can. Not too long. So this month I have been thinking about my continuing education, and I have to revise a few things that I used to know as gathering my continuing education to renew my license. I did something on communication in marriage. There is a certain communication you have to have with your spouse, not the ordinary. I even learned that there's a language of apology, you know. You got to mean it. You know, when you know you're wrong, you got to say sorry, and it's a genuine sorry.
That's major right
It's yes, yeah. You got to, when you know you're wrong, you got to be sorry and mean and acknowledge it.
Until you do, you're gonna keep researching.
That's right.
Yeah. So anybody else to identify with question two, any other words that you see, you do have this mark? Mr. Khan.
No. Sitting here, when he hit on number two, definitely I was the absent father. I can count the times, probably on one hand, maybe two hands. I've been the benefit of that I've seen my father. But my mother was the one, and she was a disciplinarian. She was a teacher. She was all of that. And I had an older brother, which at a young age he decided to, do his own thing, but it wasn't really about the home. I had 5 sisters and a younger brother, so I assumed this role as the man. And I'm talking about a teenager, young teenager of the household. Not being a disciplinarian, but just doing the best that I could, to be what I had no idea what a man was at that time. So my mother and I, we had a very close bond. Long story short, I'm now married. I have a daughter, and my mother is controlling my life. And I had to have this conversation with her. I knew it was, but I didn't want to hurt her, and I respected her enough, and she guided me enough to get to where I was going. Through a lot of different battles that I had on my own to cut the cord. So I sat my mother down at my kitchen table. She lived, I was here in Maryland by this time, and she was still in Jersey. She came to visit, and I had to cut the cord. Mom, the umbilical cord, because it was still attached. I didn't really want to let it go. But I knew that if I did not let that go, it could destroy my life more than what it was. Like I said, I was married with a child. However, it went through. It took some time for Mom to actually fully let go, but she still has it. I'm going to turn 61 in a couple of weeks. And she still hasn't fully let go, because I don't think mothers ever really do. But it's to a control point now where she knows not to try to control, just a little unnecessary input. So I really identify with that, because being the absent father, and they talked about it in another episode. I'm not going to talk. They talked about in one other session that we had here, dealing with the father and the absentee of a father. And it was so hard to learn how to be a man by example of a mother. So you try to look at other guys, and I think they told me you look at the one guy that said his friend in this session, his friend looked at his father, and his father's idea of being a man was to be successful, come home, open a can of beer, or take a drink, and that was it. But just more to it than that. And I had to learn those things by other men. Like, for example, a guy like you. Looking at you on how you're living your life, and trying to understand it in order to live a life like that. I'm now in the process of learning how to be a better husband.
You got it, Mark. Openly bonded with mother is another, because she can be all over you, and when she's all over you, she's sucking the name out, or really confusing it. I did give you an example. I don't know what I did in this class. And when I was in college, there was a certain class that had 80% ladies. Only a few guys were in that class. And we observed that we used to joke. Even when those guys sat down, they sat so carefully like ladies. So carefully. You know the way the ladies will be wearing a dress, and when they sit down, they beat the dress behind them. So, so can you imagine only having ladies? Well, unfortunately, we do. But you go together and also experience what men do, because that's who you are, right? And bring that back, bring that too into your life. You know, go to a sporting arena and play sports, right? Go to whatever it is that you could go to. I'm not sending you to a bar, but go where you could also experience a lot of men, just in case you only have ladies. And let not your mother be the only input. Yes, her input is important, but let not her be the only input, otherwise you'll be skewed in a certain direction in your mind, in your thoughts, and in your but
We had that conversation the other day. Regarding nephew, son on my side.
yeah, yeah,
Mother's side.
yeah,
Rich.
yeah, yeah,
Characteristics you take.
yeah, yes,
And not necessarily in a good way.
yeah,
And you come up, what's their addiction? That's what we do. That's what we do. We do this alcohol, no respect.
and you know, when people are abusing whatever they are abusing, they try to self-medicate a problem. There is a problem in their life that was not addressed, so therefore they are trying to medicate that. And in the process, messing themselves, messing themselves. Oh my God, let's not begin talking about addiction. Just a real number. Well, overly bordered with motherhood, there are other woods too. We will talk about them and see where we go. But let's not forget having a vision and dealing with our heart wound and so on and so forth. If you could change anything in your street, question number, if you could change anything in your street case, what would it be?
I'll tell you, this was a great session.
Yeah.
So, piggybacking right on addiction. So I had a drug problem.
Yeah.
At a young age.
Yeah.
And the same brother I told him I was asking, he went to the military. He came home, and now that he came home, he wants to step in and be dad.
Yeah.
And that was my role.
Yeah.
So we actually got into a physical fight.
Yeah.
He beat me, but it's okay. But we loved each other. We had a good relationship, and I was struggling with addiction. He was there, very supportive, trying to help me financially. I would be able to depend on him to hold my money, so that I wouldn't spend it all to find that satisfaction. It was successful for a while, and over time, I kicked. And I moved on, and long story short, got married, doing the right things, and all that kind of stuff. However, now he gets in addiction, and he's deceased now. But I think about it, that actually I'm tearing up inside right now, because when he was sick, I knew he was sick. He wouldn't identify, he wouldn't admit that he had a problem. But he had a problem, and sometimes when he would get high, because we talked to each other on the daily. And he lived out of state, I lived here. And we stayed in touch, but when he would call me sometimes so high, so high, like out of his mind, instead of being a good brother that I should have been, I would blow him off. And we have they said we communicated because we were really close coming up, and we had some theme songs, and sometimes when I hear the theme song, it makes me think about it. And if I could, and change anything, I would have been more aggressive and open to him and put the time in that was needed. He'd probably still be here tonight. Because I miss talking to him. I miss the silliness. I mean, as grown men, we would act crazy, you know.
Yeah.
But that's what I would do. Put more time in.
Yeah. Mark, I identify with what you're saying because I was born to a big brother family. Apparently, I'm not the only guy who started in a big way. I'm the only one who went to college in a big meaningful way. I'm the only one who has been able to marry in a big way. The only one who went to the only one. So, who should maybe, I should maybe have put somebody in my wings as I was coming up, then maybe he would also be there. Yeah. And you can't help it to look back and see, where are your siblings? What happened to them? Today, I end up trying to rescue them many times. There's one of them who became homeless not too long ago. I worked very hard to rescue him. Because I discovered he was sleeping in a bathroom of an apartment building. And, oh my God, even though it doesn't become like winter, there are seasons that are cold, and I wonder if after life, I had to get some money, get him into a room, orientate him to walk out again. Can I report here that this last month he paid his rent? He paid his rent. I did not pay. His Nairobi is not here. Actually, his rent is only $30, my money, and I had to pay that June, July, August, September, October, since I rescued him. But the rent for October coming is about because I had to start him up again with a little small capital. So, if I
There's a song,
could be,
I'm sorry. There's
Go
a
ahead.
song
Mhm.
that says, it just made me think of, other than us both having the same amount of siblings,
Mhm.
a couple of little of eight also.
Mhm.
And I'm quite sure there was some that didn't make it. But there's a song, don't look down on a man unless you're picking him up.
Yes, don't look down on a man
Yes.
unless you're picking
You're
him up.
picking him up. It just made me think about that. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. I'll let you good? You good? I thought to say something. Anything you want to say to any of these? If you had something to change, what would you change? Question number 3, and then we can close. Anything you think if you had a way to change, you would change.
Carter here, he was telling a story about a guy in the past that he said he had given more time,
Mhm.
become more aggressive about it. I've learned that in life when you have situations like that, hit you so deeply. Some people would say today that's your why, or sometimes when people have a passion to do things, it's normally because of the pain that they experience that pushes them so hard. Sometimes people don't understand that. So I told Dr. Ron in the past, I got 2 nephews that got married in Baltimore. So I reach out to the other nieces and nephews now more aggressively than I did in the past. Because being an uncle, it's okay, but it's a title.
Yeah.
In a family. And then we don't talk about villages, but a family is a village.
Yeah.
If you're from Europe, you say a clan.
Yeah.
And I do have an impact on it. So I do reach out aggressively to them. And do they respond the way I would like them to, or positively all the time? A couple of them do, but they live in their lives. And sometimes they may not respond the way you want them to, but you're making an effort. And you gotta accept sometimes your efforts aren't gonna be accepted. And when you accept that, you can feel better about it, you know what I mean? But in the past, the nephews that are gone now, I don't beat myself up about it much anymore, but I utilize the time I have wisely toward the ones that are still here.
So let me tell you, when we are talking about family, family is so huge. Here's what I have discovered myself. You see these things we do social media. I have come up with several groups of social media. I have my own nuclear family WhatsApp where we write messages there. My daughters are in Florida, and we are here. My wife and two sons we are here. We have a little family thing here that we talk together on that. I have another social media WhatsApp on my and we write things so anybody can let me know what is happening anytime. And then we have opened up another one called cousins and cousins, nieces. So you know what I do? I try to join these people in whatever they are at. If they are celebrating a birthday, I'll be writing congratulations messages of my, birthday. If they have an anniversary, I'm joining them. That's how to do community with family. Don't you let things be in your eyesight. Because tomorrow is not given. It's not. If they have a death, I want to know and I want to be there in one way or the other. Because time is short, right? So that's what we do. And with that being said, I wanna make a disclosure about December. December will have one lesson, it's you and I. Because we're supposed to meet on the first and that, right?
Yes.
So we will do that. And we should have done 3rd December and 17th. 17th, I don't know.
Glad to cancel that ticket, buddy.
I said,
You're gonna have to go to that.
my mother is coming out of 90. I think she's 90. I could be wrong in the math. That lady is. I cannot be in America whole Canada yet. I told myself that I'll go back there once a year. So be with them from my when I want to take off around December. December, by the way, is the major holiday. June 1st is the self-government. This one, I think it's so I wanted to be there, but we were right on that. And the year would turn when we are there. You miss us. The group that I teach of 2nd and 4th, I'll do them 10. You see where they're one
I was told Christmas.
Now, that today, we have that today. Then I can then right. So, did you have that? Didn't you? Thank you, gentlemen. Now, what do you do? I know what I did. I have you on I had only one. The other guy might even know, didn't know. It might be innocent thinking that this thing is bad or something. It's not bad.
There was one guy
There was.
when I went up there and helped you.
You should have jumped here.
No, I think he's still there. It's just one participant. I don't know if it's
He's here. The one participant is me.
Oh, I thought it was somebody else.
No, the one participant. If you saw it, if you ever see be admitted. Come here. Just eating that part and then get admitted. I said I do. And you know why? Please record it. I'm not looking for it for the sport that you didn't attend. I recorded and I said it. All right, but I put it in the WhatsApp group and you can access it because these are free lessons and it is my goodwill that I need to. It's like when you've gone somewhere and you found this body of knowledge, share it. 20 minutes. It doesn't have me. It doesn't have me to be 90 minutes at the beginning of my study. Right? Okay. Coordinate, they need for you. Our visit after it is recorded, I go home and my son, almost 20 years old, YouTube thing. It becomes a YouTube thing. It becomes a YouTube recording. And once it is there, it is there. So look at it with your book, go over it again. And thank you so much for being with us. Thank you.